Hi, and welcome to How Do I BI, a many-part screencast series on using SQL Server Analysis Services 2008, which is a counterpart to my book, Smart Business Intelligence Solutions with Microsoft SQL Server 2008. I'm Lynn Lange, a developer evangelist for Microsoft in Southern California. In this edition, we're going to talk about building data mining models. In particular, we're going to take a look at input, predict, and predict-only column markers used in BIDS model building. We'll also review column content types because these two do go hand in hand. Before we go to the screencast, I want to go over a couple of FAQs and gotchas. It's very important to understand that you can adjust the usage of the columns and the selected columns in the models even after you've initially constructed them. And this is a common technique when you are working in the data mining software development lifecycle. As you'll see in subsequent screencasts, there is an included mechanism, more than one actually, called lift or profit chart, which allows you to evaluate the effectiveness of your selected model. And you may find that you wish to tune that model by making these types of changes after you evaluate it. You can use the suggest button in the BIDS model building wizard to suggest both input, predictable, and content types. However, it's really important that you validate the results because they might not be what you're looking for. You can also use a new capability in 2008 called a column filter to more granularly filter the source data that your model is using, and I'll demonstrate how to do that. The gotchas, as I've been saying throughout the series, is the selected algorithm must support the particular data and content types for your selected algorithm. Also, it's important for you to understand how to properly model case and nested input tables for particular algorithms that commonly use them, such as sequence clustering. And with that, we're going to go ahead and go to the screencast. We're going to take a look at the use of input and predictable column markers in building of data mining models. While we're doing this, we'll also be reviewing content types associated with particular available algorithms. And we'll use two methods to do this. We'll look at the existing models that are part of AdventureWorks. I've opened BIDS here and loaded up AdventureWorks. And we'll also create some new mining models using the wizard. So we'll start there. To do that, I'm going to click on the Mining Structures folder in Solution Explorer, and then I'm going to right-click and open up the new Mining Structure wizard. Then I'm going to click Next and select my source data from a relational database. And then I'm going to select as my first algorithm to look at Nave Bayes. And then I'm going to click Next and select my data source view, and I'll just select the DIM customer case table so we can evaluate customer data. And then I want to specify the training data. And this is really the key working area in this wizard when you are working with marking your columns as key, input, or predictable. So by default, this wizard has sampled your source data and detected that the customer key column is a key source column. And then you next are going to say which columns you want to include as input columns. Now you can take the easy way and simply select the checkbox at the top of the input column, and that will select all input values. That's not really a best practice because you want to only include data that's going to be meaningful. For example, if the address information is meaningful only at the city or state level, you wouldn't want to include address detail information as been done here. Of course, you can easily change that by just selecting it. Once you select at least one predictable value, and we'll just select commute distance for illustration here, then the suggest button in this wizard becomes available. And once we click this, what happens is the data is sampled from the source, and then there's an internal algorithm which then suggests additional input columns that might be useful for the particular algorithm that we selected and ranks them by order of usefulness. And this can really be helpful when you're trying to determine whether or not to include attributes. It's a very trial and error process as you're learning your data and learning your algorithms. You'll notice as I scroll down, some values are not available here, and that would be because of the data type and the algorithm. So if we click OK, then we click Next, you'll note that the specify column, content, and data type property sheet of the data mining wizard is now available. And it is kind of interesting because we did select an algorithm that doesn't support continuous content types, so we would have to make a change to the content type here under birth date. In order for this to work properly, we actually receive an error when we process this. So even though this is a wizard and has a lot of intelligence, you still have to have some knowledge around the algorithm, or it's not going to be successful. Or you could simply go back and say, I'm really not interested in birth date, so I'm not going to include that in this particular model, and then you'd correct that issue. You can see in terms of the content types, they've been marked as discrete primarily. Again, date of first purchase has been marked as continuous, so we could change that to discrete, or we could click detect to see if it was being modeled as discrete by sampling the data. And then we're going to go ahead and click next, and we'll see the create testing data set page of the wizard, which holds out 30% so that we can validate our model after we've made it. And we'll click next, and we'll notice that in this particular case, allow drill through is actually grayed out in the completing the wizard step, and that's because for this algorithm, drill through is not available. So if we click back all the way back to the beginning and we select a new algorithm, so we're going to now select clustering, for example, and then we click next and we click forward, going back up to the customer table as our source table, and then we get into the specify training data dialog box again, which is the area that we're really working in this particular screencast. And we see that we've got the ability to adjust the key, select the input, and select the predictable as well. And if we click suggest, again, we're going to get similar type results, and then click next. Notice now we have this continuous value, which will be supported by this particular algorithm. And then we click detect to see if there's any changes. Click next. See that create testing set is still the same, and note in the completing the wizard that allow drill through is now available because this algorithm does support it. Now if we click all the way back again and we use a completely different algorithm to get a sense of how the wizard helps us to build and select the appropriate input and predictable values along with content types, we'll select time series, and then we're going to click next and select from our tables. We'll deselect customer. We're going to select the time series view, and then click next, and then we're going to select as key the time index, and as input we'll select the amount, and then as predictable we'll select the quantity, and then we'll click suggest to see what is suggested for us. So the suggest related columns is suggesting that we include the date series and the time index first, and so let's go ahead and include the time index as an input. If we do that, then notice it shows us that we've made an error. So again, the wizard has intelligence built in, because if we've selected as input, then we don't have a time key, and for a time series algorithm we have to have a time key. So we fix that error, and then we can include amount as input and quantity as input and predictable if we wanted to do that. And then we click next and see that these values have all been set as continuous. If we wanted to make a change and set them to a different type of content, we would have to make a change to the source data, because only continuous is available. You'll remember that continuous is a set of unique values across a range, as opposed to discrete or discretized, which is bucketed or grouped values. If we click detect, there's no changes made. Click next. Notice we have no drill through available because this algorithm doesn't support drill through. So this may seem a bit redundant to just go through the wizard back and forth like this. However, it's a great technique for learning when you're just getting started. So let's do one more. Let's do sequence clustering, and we'll go forward and we'll click on the table type, and we'll select for our case table the sequence orders, and then we'll select the sequence line items for our nested table because we want to have the details about our orders. Then we'll click next, and note that order number was selected properly as the key for the case table. However, it's telling us that we're missing a key for our nested table, so we'll select line number for that, and then it will mark that as input. So that's different than the key sequence that we just looked at in terms of time. Now we need to select some input values, so we'll select the income group, the region, the model, and then we want to select a predictable, one or more predictables, and let's select the region. So we want to find out where our customers are coming from. Then if we click suggest, we can see if there are any additional suggestions, and we don't have a huge amount of columns to pick from here, but it is showing us the value of including income group if we wanted to do that. And then we click next, and notice that the content types have been detected, key and key sequence, and the values are set up as discrete. And now we have the ability, because we're using a different algorithm, to change the content type from discrete to continuous, cyclical, leave it at discrete, discretized, or ordered, if that is the nature of the data. And then we click next, we have the testing set, and then we can have drill through. So I encourage you to spend some time going back and forth in this wizard, and before we leave the screencast, there's one more thing that I want to show you. I'm going to do that using the sample targeted mailing mining structure that includes 4 different mining models. And inside of here, we're going to take a look at the mining model TM clustering, and note that you can make adjustments to your input and predict and key selections after you've run the wizard by simply clicking on the value. So for example, if in this clustering model we were no longer interested in the gender attribute, we could mark it to ignore. Or if we wanted to predict a value, for example, number of cars owned, we could mark it to predict rather than input. Predict only rather than predict. Predict means both input and predict, and not super clear in the interface, so it's a good thing for discussion. Another capability inside of the mining model builder that is not immediately obvious is if we right-click on one of the mining models, we have the ability to set the algorithm parameters, which we saw earlier over in the properties section. And here I am on the clustering algorithm, and you can see that you can look at the values as well as make some adjustments. Now sometimes the ability to adjust is only available in the Enterprise Edition, and that's normally stated in the description. So here's an example of an adjustment that more advanced data mining users might choose to implement for clustering. There are actually underlying the clustering algorithm different implementations of clustering, and these are all again explained in the documentation, books online, and as well as in my book. So these are 4 different types of clustering: scalable EM, non-scalable EM, scalable k-means, and non-scalable k-means that you may want to choose in implementing your particular mining model. So one last feature, if we right-click on any of these mining models, and then we'll see in the context-sensitive menu that we have this new capability to set a mining model filter, and I'm actually going to go to the an appropriate value here. So I'll go to maybe gender and right-click and then set mining model filter, and then we'll get the mining model filter dialog box builder. Then we select the column, so we'll say gender and equal to female, for example, and we can set multiple conditions, and we can either and or them, and then I might set age and say equal to 35, or whatever we might want our age to be, and so on and so forth. And once we're done, then we can apply this more granular filter to our particular model and take a look at the results. And this is a new capability for tuning inside of Analysis Services 2008. So as you're working with your algorithms, I've recorded now 3 different screencasts, and depending on your level of familiarity, I've given you a lot of tips and tricks inside of the interface to better understand how the algorithms work. And if you're needing additional information, there's documentation in books online as well as in my book, and Jamie McLennan has written with a colleague an entire book on data mining implementation that I also highly recommend. Thank you.